One of my quarantine projects has been learning to make kombucha, and after 8 pretty disappointing batches, I am finally getting somewhere, so cheers. Hello, Sophie here. I'm a 2D artist who accidentally wandered into Blender one day and never left. So I've been making grease pencil art for a few months now, and I've discovered some cool stuff along the way. So today, I'll be sharing how to use hue randomization to make this, in my humble opinion, beautiful multicolored line art effect. So, when you create a new file and you choose the 2D animation option, you start automatically with a grease pencil stroke object. So within this, we're going to go into the draw mode. Just a few things to get started. We're going to make sure that vertex paint up here is checked. So this is what's going to let us to do anything multicolored. And just make sure up here that you're in rendered view and not solid view, like typically it starts out with when you open up Blender. And so, what we're going to be playing around with can be found under the stroke button here. So click this little box that says randomize. And then there are a bunch of settings here, and I recommend playing around with all of them and seeing what you get. It's a lot of fun. But for today, let's just focus on the hue. So if you just turn the hue randomization up and you start drawing, it's a look. I'm personally not a fan. So what this is doing, we can see if we go into edit mode. It's basically assigning a random hue to every vertex. And this is within the range that we set with that slider. If you do want this effect, but for it to be not quite so, up here in the stroke tab, above the randomize and post-processing, you can play around with the simplify value, and the higher you put it, this will reduce the number of vertices that actually are drawn when you draw, and so this will reduce the effect and make it a lot more subtle and a lot nicer. But I really fell in love with this tool when I discovered this little button over here next to the slider. This makes the hue randomization affect the stroke as a whole rather than every single vertex. So this makes it so that each stroke you draw has a slightly different hue. When I saw this, I was madly obsessed. But here's where it starts to get tricky. So when I start my line art for my pieces, I either have a rough idea of the colors I want or no idea at all. And anyways, I like the freedom of being able to discover my color as I work. Something that's been a wonderful surprise about working with Blender is that going in and changing literally any color, either at the material level or with different modifiers, is so easy. This makes it possible to try out different color schemes and to make different versions of the same piece. And this is so valuable to me. So I need a way to be able to change my line art color too. The problem, then, is how to change the line art color while keeping that beautiful randomized multicolored line art effect. So there is the hue saturation modifier over here. And originally I would use this, but I just never liked the look of it. I never liked the look that it gave the colors. And anyways, this modifier, it still has the problem of not giving me any control over the degree of hue randomization after I've made my strokes. And that's just something that I want control over, so that wasn't gonna work for me. So here's what I've been doing. Rainbow line art. So I have my line art brush here, and I basically just set the hue randomization to 1. Now, it can be weird to draw with this in rendered view because you're gonna have some strokes that are in the yellow range and other strokes that are in the purple range, and it's just gonna show up as a lot of different values, and that's fine. It'll all turn out okay in the end. And so I do recommend when you do this drawing in solid view so that it all just shows up as a black line art, and rather what you're seeing is the strength of the strokes rather than the colors, because anyways, at this point, all we want it to focus on is the strength. So you've tried this out, you've made your line art, it looks absolutely silly. Then, when you're ready to test out different colors, what I do is I add the Tint Modifier. So the tint modifier works best when I choose a color that's at the brightest and most saturated it can be. So this scale just completely to the top and at the edges of the color wheel. Then you can play around with this scale to just see what degree of hue randomization you want depending on what works best for that specific color. I typically work around 0.6 to 0.85. I just tweak the number until I get the effect I like for the color that I'm using. So then to darken it, I add back in that hue saturation modifier that I didn't like, but I just use it for the value this time. Basically, not sure why, but when you're using the tint modifier, if you try to get a darker color for your line art by just lowering the value of the tint that you're using, you get an effect that's not great. It's very weird and desaturated and kind of feels off. But if you lower the value of the hue saturation modifier, you get to keep the vibrant, beautiful colors while also making it dark enough to, actually function as line art. So that's my tip. I hope this was helpful. This is my first video, so it probably goes without saying that I'm still finding my sea legs. But please do comment down below if you have any questions you'd like me to answer or anything you'd like to see me cover in the future. Thank you for being here. Subscribe if you're also falling in love with grease pencil because it's freaking awesome. Or if for whatever reason you just want to hear more of my voice and see more of this face.